Hi, welcome back to my channel. I'm Ivana, I love books, and today we're gonna talk about some recent reads. So I have my handy dandy reading journal here, and every month I like to go through all the books that I've read and think about the themes that I notice in my reading. Today we're gonna talk about 6 books. 3 of them I used to escape, the other 3 were memoirs, and lastly I'm gonna talk to you about things that brought me joy this month. Hopefully you have a nice ice cold beverage or a warm one and let's get started. So escape. For me, when I get really stressed out, I like to listen to audiobooks and also just read books that suck you in, that might not necessarily have a lot of character development, but they are plot heavy and they keep you going. And so that is what I gravitated towards. The first book that I read in this category was The Husbands by Hiii Gramazio, and this one was kindly given to me by Libro FM. It's part of their influencer program, so thank you to Libro as always. So here's the premise of the book. First we have this woman, her name I believe is Lauren, and honestly it might not be Lauren. Let me look that up. It is Lauren. So Lauren gets home from a bachelorette party. It's set in the UK, so it's a hen party and not a bachelorette party, but you get what I mean. And she gets home and she's drunk and her phone is at 2%, and this man is in her house. And she's like, what are you doing? Like, get out of my house. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm your husband. And then she goes to call the police. She checks her lock screen and it's a picture of them. So she's like, maybe he's onto something. Maybe I am married to him. And maybe I've just had a little bit too much to drink. So her phone dies. She can't call the police. She goes in the house. I think they end up sleeping in different bedrooms. And then the next morning or whatever, he goes up, the husband goes up to find a light bulb in the attic. And lo and behold, the man who comes back is not the first husband. It's a different man altogether. And so she has this magical attic that anytime one of her husbands goes up to the attic, a different man comes down. So she keeps interchanging them. She sees that one of them is wearing Crocs, so she's like, nah, next. And yeah, hilarity ensues. I think that this book was really fun because Lauren is like super reckless. The author, Hiii Gramazio, is actually a video game designer, and I can totally see that working into the story. So we see a lot of like alternate universes. We get to see how Lauren's life changes based on the man that she's with, all the scenarios. We also get to see her in one of the scenarios. She works at a hardware store, but she doesn't know anything. And I think she also works at a gardening store. And you get to see her kind of figure out what the heck is going on. You get to see all of the shenanigans that she goes through, and it's just fun to watch her exchange husbands constantly, and for ridiculous reasons too. She gets into a lot of trouble, and in the end it was just a good time. This isn't really a book for character development or for like learning a lesson. It's just a book that is pure plot, and I needed that. I did not want to think during the month of May, so I'm glad that I had this, and the audiobook is really fun. And I think that this book would be good for anyone who thinks about the things that could have been, and this idea of soulmates. It got me thinking, is there really just one person out there for you, or are there many people that could be for you? Not that you have to partner up with anybody. I really enjoyed this one, and I recommend it if you're looking to like shut off your brain for a little bit and just listen to a wacky story. Okay, so book 2 is Weasels in the Attic by Hiroko Oyamada, and this is a woman in translation book. It was originally written in Japanese. It's from the perspective of a man. I believe there's 3 stories within this novella, like mini stories that are all interrelated, and he and his wife are struggling because they're trying to conceive a child and it's just not happening. There's just like a lot of bizarre things. A lot of my notes are like, there's a metaphor in there somewhere, I just can't figure it out. So this man has a friend who likes to collect or likes to breed exotic fish, so we get to hear about fish tanks, and there's weasels in another friend's attic, or maybe it's the same friend, I can't remember. I read this in several flights, and then we were on the road in Costa Rica, so it's a little bit hazy in my mind. It was a good distraction and it was just really weird. The main character is a total sleazebag, and it does touch upon gender differences when it comes to childbearing and fertility and all that, and how women are often blamed. The man keeps talking about how after women give birth they look so unattractive, and he's really like so icky, but I think he's icky on purpose. The book is really eerie. The mood is really ominous. I am having a hard time describing this book, but there are a lot of musings on life, and I recommend this to anyone who likes weird books and also books about parenthood, and specifically gendered expectations on parenthood and how unfair the responsibilities tend to be for women. My third and final escapist fiction book is What Happened to Ruthy Ramirez by Claire Jiménez. This book was unexpectedly fun and funny given its serious subject matter. I picked this up because again, I wanted plot, and I hadn't read a single Latina book, and I still haven't read any more, so I need to really prioritize those kinds of books because I feel like I'm doing a bad job of it. I especially want to read more books in Spanish, but I digress. So this book follows 4 women or girls in the Ramirez family. We have Ruthy, who goes missing when she is, I believe, 12 in the 2000s. We have Jessica, who's the oldest daughter, who is an overworked mom. We have Nina, who I think is either the middle daughter or the younger daughter. I think she's the middle daughter. And she is the most assimilated to United Statesian culture. She doesn't speak Spanish. She goes to college, so she's a first-generation college graduate. She is trying really hard to achieve her United Statesian dream, and she's just trying to get away from the chaos of her working class family. We also have these girls' mom, who is in her 40s. She is wacky. She is absolutely a stereotype, but there is truth to some of our stereotypes in our culture. They're Puerto Rican too, so it was nice reading about Puerto Ricans. The mom is an active member of the church. She teaches parenting classes, and she's a total chismosa. She loves to gossip. She has this older friend named Irene, who is such a funny like sidekick. There's so much comedic relief because of her. So one day, Nina or Jessica, one of them, they're watching TV and they see this girl, or this young woman named Ruby. Ruby is the spitting image of Ruthy, and Ruthy was never found. She went missing. Maybe the cops thought that she was a runaway, so they are freaking out. They're like, this is her doppelganger, like it's probably her. We have to figure out what's going on. So the Ramirez family goes on this whirlwind of an adventure to go find Ruthy. I loved the themes of mother-daughter relationships, the exploration of corporal punishment in Latina families. There was good commentary on the church and also the hypocrisy of religious people, especially religious parents who say they did everything for their children and yet they are beating their kids. I think that Ruthy's mother was a total contradiction, and I think a lot of us in the community can relate to that. I work at a public school in a city, and I thought that the depictions of public school were also really accurate. Like I said, I also thought it was hilarious, and I think that this would make a really good mini series. It was fun. It was a rom. I feel like I've been shying away from reading Latina books because a lot of them resort to stereotypes and tell the same story, and this did tell a story that is all too common and familiar. It does happen that women of color go missing or are murdered and society just ignores them. So I think that it was shedding light on that, but in a way that felt not really fresh, but still like interesting. And I think that the characters did shine through. I really enjoyed all of the voices. You get to see different perspectives, and it felt really fun. So if you are looking for a romp, I recommend What Happened to Ruthy Ramirez. And now we're moving on to nonfiction / memoirs. Okay, so the first nonfiction book I want to talk about is a book that was not escapist. It actually was a book that I felt was incredibly intimidating to start. I'm really actually so thankful that one of my students convinced me to buddy read it with them, and it is the autobiography of Malcolm X as told to Alex Haley. I think I've been reading it since February or March, and we basically read 50 pages every week. I think the fact that it's such a classic made it feel intimidating for me, but it actually was extremely like compulsively readable, and I'm glad that I still chunked it because I wanted to soak it all in and like get it. So I audiobooked the whole book, but I also tan read it a lot of the times. And before I canceled my Audible subscription a million years ago, I actually got this Audible exclusive. It was narrated by Lawrence Fishburne, and it is so good. He's such a good narrator. And honestly, it's a shame that Amazon has such a monopoly over the audiobook industry. I am team Libro all the way, but I'm also so thankful that I was able to grab this audiobook because I do think that his narration enhanced the experience. I was so stressed to write my reflection on this book. I actually ended up writing 2.5 pages, and a lot of it was just like reactions to things. This book follows his extraordinary life as a Black Muslim revolutionary and all that he did for Black rights in the United States and beyond. It begins with his upbringing in Detroit, and then it follows him to Boston where his sister lived, to his Lindy hopping, shoe shining days where he would conk out his hair and wear funky suits and get into all sorts of business. And then it follows him to New York City where he worked for the railroad company and he did a lot of hustling, and eventually like that hustling continues all throughout the United States until he is ultimately incarcerated and discovers the Nation of Islam and the leadership of Elijah Muhammad. And it is when he is incarcerated that he discovers his love of books. He said that his alma mater was books. I had no idea that he had only been formally educated until the 8th grade because he was such a learned man, and it just goes to show that you can learn a lot beyond school, though it is unfortunate that he wasn't able to finish his schooling. Then it follows his leadership throughout the United States with the Nation of Islam, this whole notion of being anti-integration because it does focus on the feelings of white people, and he asks himself like, why should the Black community integrate with the white community when the white community has only ever kept Black folks down? Obviously he says it in a more eloquent way, but I thought that that was really interesting. I knew a lot about Malcolm X starting out. I'm a civics teacher. I've paired his Ballot or the Bullet speech where he talks about the American nightmare with James Truslow Adams' idea of the American dream. He was the man who coined the American dream, and how the American dream is really so difficult to attain if you don't look a certain way or are from a certain background. It was also really interesting to see his critiques of Martin Luther King Jr. He really threw a lot of shade at him. He called the March on Washington the farce on Washington. Like, why should Black folks make the struggle for Black rights palatable to white people? The tone of it was really kind of funny and sharp, and obviously like there's some horrific things that happen, but it was such an enjoyable read. I think that Alex Haley did so well like capturing the essence and the voice of Malcolm X. Malcolm X certainly told it like it was, and sometimes said a lot of things that I didn't agree with regarding certain groups of people, including women. But I think that you can take the good with the bad, right? You can be a critical thinker and still disagree with the things he says about women and still respect a lot of what he said, especially about white folks' oppression of Black Americans. I feel like I'm all over the place because I want to do this book justice because it was just so good. But back to his idea of integration really harming Black communities. I had never heard of this. I've always thought about desegregation as something positive, and again, like it is in theory, but in practice I learned about how integration or desegregation could be harmful to Black communities in Dr. Bettina Love's book. I am blanking on the name. I'm just going to show it on the screen, but in it she writes about how school desegregation actually ended up forcing more hate onto Black kids and also like deprived them of the opportunity to build consciousness with other people in the Black community because they were forced to be taught by white teachers who didn't really understand the needs of the community. So that was also really eye-opening to see in this book and to see where this idea came from. I think that we should be teaching more Malcolm X in the United States in schools, and it's a shame that I was never taught about Malcolm X growing up because I think that his ideas can lead to really good conversations and dialogue. If you've been wanting to read this book for a while, I strongly recommend that you bite the bullet and do it. I think that it has a little bit of everything. We get to see Malcolm X views really evolve once he does his pilgrimage to Mecca and travels across Africa and Europe. I also think that you should not sleep on the epilogue. The epilogue is pretty long. I feel like it's almost 100 pages, and it is actually not narrated in the audiobook. I wanted to listen to it, so I found it narrated on YouTube, and you really get to see the behind the scenes look on how Alex Haley was able to build so much trust with Malcolm X and how Malcolm X like basically didn't trust him, and like honestly, who could blame Malcolm X? Like he was clearly clearly getting spied on, and it's just really funny, like the insights that Alex Haley has, and I don't want to spoil anything, so I'm just gonna leave it at that, but do not sleep on the epilogue because it is really good. I truly respect Malcolm X's passion, his fearlessness, and just how unapologetic he was. I really want to continue reading more memoirs because that's really where it's at for me. I feel like it just does something to my brain. So yeah, that was Malcolm X's autobiography. So our second nonfiction book is Sociopath by Patric Gagne. If you notice me shift, it's because my camera overheated yet again, but we're good. This is written by a woman who is a diagnosed sociopath who has a PhD in psychology with a focus on sociopathy. So at the start of this book, Patric Gagne recognizes her privilege as a white woman who is cisgender and heterosexual and also is well off socioeconomically. Her father is a record executive and she actually worked as a record executive herself. I do believe that she recognizes that had she not had these privileges in life, that she would probably either be in jail right now or even worse, dead. Gagne wrote this book because she wanted to prove and to show that sociopaths are more than their darkness. And she really feels for other sociopaths who have been unable to get treatment for their disorder because a lot of therapists are unwilling to work with sociopaths because they're such good liars. So this book taught me a lot about sociopathy. I learned that sociopaths are not interested in morals. They also don't feel any remorse or fear. She got herself into so many situations where like the average person would be extremely freaked out about, and she just did not care and just went on with what she was doing. She also said that she, as a sociopath, has this urge to be violent, and in order to not be violent and hurt other people, she has resorted to other things such as stealing. She uses this really helpful metaphor of a pot about to boil. When she feels the urge to be violent, it's almost like she's going to burst. So she has to do something else that doesn't hurt other people. She's constantly trying to stop this feeling from bubbling over and like leading into violent action. And so she writes about methods that she's used to cope with it. And of course, her coping mechanisms a lot of the times were not healthy. She also likens sociopathy to a feeling disability, and she has been able, allegedly, to train herself to be more empathetic. And she says that cognitive behavioral therapy really helps CBT, and she really wrote this book to fill in a gap in knowledge and research on sociopathy because, again, people in her field tend to see sociopaths as people who are not worth rehabilitating or helping, especially because sociopaths, like I said, are adept liars and they're also prone to illegal destructive activities. So she really treats herself and other sociopaths with a little bit more humanity in order to try to treat them. This book was juicy. I really enjoyed reading about Gagne's life story, and I don't know if I would have picked this up if I hadn't gotten it for free, and I'm really glad that I did. It was really eye-opening and it was about a topic that I knew nothing about. So that was great. I marathoned it the day before I left for Costa Rica, and I love that she narrated the audiobook herself and that she has been able to overcome her violent tendencies, allegedly, and that she is able to live a relatively healthy life with her family. So yeah, if you're interested in memoirs about disorders, I highly recommend this one. And lastly, I read Hanif Abdurraqib's book, There's Always This Year, Notes on Basketball and Ascension. And to be completely honest, I really thought that I would love this. I absolutely loved They Can't Kill Us Till They Kill Us, which is a compilation of essays about music and different musical artists and how that music has impacted his life. Hanif Abdurraqib is a poet, he is a music writer, he is just a really awesome human being. I follow him on social media. I think he has great insights. But this book, for some reason, just didn't do it for me. I think it's like a personal preference kind of thing. This book, I believed, would be a book about basketball, and it is, but I didn't really learn much about it. I think a lot of it was like memoir style, but there wasn't a lot going on. He meandered a lot, and he did talk about growing up in Cleveland, Ohio in the golden age of basketball in the 90s and the early aughts, and seeing LeBron James go from like a high school star to an NBA star, and he shed light on his own upbringing with his family, on being incarcerated, on racism, on the joys and disappointments of basketball and how it pertained to his life. But I feel like the whole thing was like a very long meander, and there was just a lot of metaphors and it was hard to keep track of where he was going. I think he goes off on a lot of tangents, and I think that style just isn't for me a lot of the time. I think it can work sometimes, but this just didn't work for me. And I guess I was just looking for a little bit more substance. I do love his music writing and I like his poetry as well, so I really want to read Little Devil in America, but this book just didn't hit for me, and I'm sorry, internet, because everybody else seems to really have enjoyed it. And next we're going to talk about the little joys that I had this past month. My first little joy was being able to travel internationally. I chaperoned 2 trips this school year, one to Costa Rica this past month and another to Peru in like October, November. I think I'm going to show you some footage of that and do a little voiceover. Peru was a dream. This was a cultural and language trip. We were in awe of the Andes and the views in general, and I didn't take any videos of food, but the food there was my favorite because everything was fresh and local and flavorful. This trip was also really physically demanding. I went on the hardest hike of my life up to Rainbow Mountain, but it was worth it. This is Aguascalientes, the base of Machu Picchu, and wait for it. Watching this footage back is already making me so nostalgic, and I really cannot wait to return in the near future. The trip to Costa Rica was a little bit different because it was focused on turtle conservation, specifically the leatherback turtle. Costa Rica reminded me so much of Puerto Rico, except for the fact that they have monkeys. This was a family of monkeys that was right outside of my cabin. They were so stinking cute. And this is some super sped up footage of little hatchlings being released into the ocean. My second little joy was seeing Chappell Rowan perform live at Boston Calling. I had so much fun. I went with Kat and we just had the time of our lives, even though we could barely see the stage. We also got to see Hosier and Megan Thee Stallion, and that was just a really, really fun time. I love pop music, and Chappell was like totally the highlight for me. And her whole album, The Rise and Fall of a Midwestern Princess, is just iconic. And my last little joy was watching Next in Fashion on Netflix. I feel like that show is so fast-paced and fun. It's like a fashion design. I feel like it got canceled or something, but Dan and I watched all of it this past month and it just brought me a lot of comfort. And I don't know anything about how clothes are made, so it was just really amazing to see an idea become a sketch, become an actual item of clothing. So I recommend that if you are interested in reality TV shows that are competition based and showcase people's talents. But yeah, that's it. That was my month. Those are the books that I read. Those are the things that made me happy. If you read any of these books, I would love to know your opinions about them, or if you have any recommendations. I would also love to hear what is bringing you joy, and I hope that you are having a lovely start to the summer, and I will see you in my next video. Bye!